The narrow streets of the town overflowed with lights, garlands, and laughter. Women in bright saris carried brass trays of sweets, and men clapped in rhythm to the drummers. To outsiders, it looked like joy spilling into every corner, but to those closer, the pace felt too hurried, too forced. The match had been arranged only weeks earlier, a whirlwind decision that left more questions than answers. Arjun stood tall under the mandap, his shawani glittering with gold thread. He wore the smile of a dutiful son, though his eyes remained cold, calculating, as if every ritual was an act to endure rather than a promise to honor. His father, beaming beside him, whispered blessings and pride. Few noticed how Arjun's gaze strayed often to the crowd, scanning faces, measuring whispers. Meera entered quietly, draped in crimson silk, her hair heavy with jasmine. Applause and cheers erupted, yet her steps carried the weight of hesitation. She was known in town for her calm voice and gentle manner, the teacher who stayed late after school to help children read. Today, however, her eyes seemed distant, searching for reassurance that never arrived. She looked once toward her parents. Their smiles were warm but strained, as though trying to silence doubts buried deep. When the vows were spoken, Meera's lips trembled on certain words. Arjun's hand pressed hers with a firmness that felt more like command than comfort. The priest chanted blessings of unity and harmony, while above them, strings of marigolds swayed in the night breeze. Fireworks cracked beyond the temple walls, a false thunder meant to drown unease. At the banquet, guests gossiped between bites of biryani and gulab jamun. Some praised the grandeur, saying it was a union blessed by wealth and respect. Others muttered that Arjun had been restless in recent months, spending nights drinking in faraway towns, his temper unpredictable. A woman leaned toward her neighbor, whispering, "Too quick, too sudden." What was the hurry? Her words were swallowed by the music before they could spread. Meera sat beside Arjun, smiling faintly as relatives paraded gifts before them. Yet her fingers fidgeted beneath the table, folding and unfolding the edge of her dupatta. Arjun noticed and placed his hand over hers, the gesture drawing approving nods from onlookers. But the pressure in his grip was sharp enough to still her movement, leaving her silent once more. As night deepened, lanterns glowed across the courtyard. Children chased each other between tables, their laughter echoing like innocence, untouched by the heaviness that clung to the couple. Meera excused herself briefly, stepping into the shadows behind the house. She inhaled the night air, chest rising with the effort to steady herself. A friend followed, asking softly, "Are you happy?" Meera forced a smile. "Of course," she said, though her voice cracked on the final word. Returning to the courtyard, she found Arjun, watching her from across the room. His expression was unreadable, part pride, part warning. When the final fireworks exploded above, painting the sky in crimson and silver, the crowd cheered. Amid the celebration, Meera's eyes reflected something else entirely, a flicker of dread, hidden quickly behind lowered lashes. By the time the last guest departed and silence settled over the house, the stage was set. The wedding night awaited, promising intimacy to the world, but concealing a truth far darker inside the groom's heart. The house had grown still after the chaos of celebration. Faint trails of incense lingered in the air, mixing with the fading sweetness of marigolds. Behind closed doors, the weight of expectation pressed harder than the silence. Arjun poured 2 glasses of wine, his movements deliberate, controlled. The liquid glinted deep red beneath the lantern light. He glanced at Meera, who sat at the edge of the bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked like a child waiting for permission to breathe. "Drink," he said, his tone carrying both command and coaxing charm. "It is our night." She hesitated, eyes darting to the glass. She had never touched alcohol before, but refusing would only spark questions. She accepted the drink, the stem cold against her trembling fingers. Arjun raised his glass first, smiling too broadly. "To us. To forever." His voice dropped low, the words almost mocking. Meera mirrored his gesture, her sip tentative. The taste was strange, sweet at first, then bitter, a sharpness she couldn't name. She coughed lightly, Covering her discomfort with a faint laugh, Arjun watched her throat move as she swallowed, his gaze unblinking. Minutes passed. Conversation felt forced. Arjun spoke of family duties, of appearances to maintain, of the life ahead. Meera nodded, offering soft responses, though her chest grew tight, her stomach uneasy. The bitterness lingered. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she pressed her hand to her temple. "I don't feel well," she whispered. Arjun leaned closer, his smile never faltering. "You'll be fine. Just relax. This is how new journeys feel, strange at first." His hand brushed her cheek, but the touch carried no warmth. Her body weakened, shoulders slumping. She tried to rise, but her knees buckled. The room tilted, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Her glass slipped, shattering against the floor. "Arjun," her voice cracked, barely audible. Fear welled in her eyes, pleading silently for truth. He caught her before she collapsed fully, lowering her onto the bed with practiced calm. His hand lingered on her pulse, counting, measuring. Her breaths grew shallow, uneven. Inside his mind, thoughts twisted. Years of resentment toward women who rejected him, the burden of debts he masked with arrogance, the shame he refused to bear alone. This marriage, this night, it was all meant to reclaim power he felt had been stolen. Meera's gaze fluttered, fighting to hold on to consciousness. "Why?" she whispered, the word barely leaving her lips. Arjun leaned close, his whisper brushing against her ear. "Because you will never leave me." Her eyes widened faintly, then dimmed, her body surrendering to the weight pulling her under. The lantern flickered once, its flame shrinking low. Arjun rose slowly, standing over her still form. His shadow loomed across the walls, larger than life, darker than the silence that filled the room. Outside, the town lay asleep, unaware that the bride inside the grand house had already begun her descent into death's grip. And as midnight drew near, the true horror of the night was only beginning. The lantern sputtered against the heavy stillness, its glow casting long, uneven shadows across the walls. Arjun sat at the edge of the bed, unmoving, watching Meera's chest rise and fall in shallow, irregular rhythms. Her lips twitched as if struggling to form words that could no longer emerge. The poison had done its work, but he wasn't satisfied with silence alone. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. To any passerby, it might have seemed tender, but in his eyes it was possession. She belonged to him now, her voice, her life, her body. He whispered to himself, steady, as if reciting a vow, "You'll never shame me, never run." The night pressed in, thick with oppressive quiet. Beyond the walls, stray dogs barked faintly in the distance, and a temple bell rang once before fading into stillness. Inside, time slowed. Arjun rose and locked the door, sliding the bolt into place with a heavy thud. The house would hear nothing. He dragged a trunk from the corner, its iron hinges groaning. Inside lay the tools he had hidden days before, cloth, rope, and beneath them, a blade wrapped in oiled cloth. His fingers lingered on the handle, feeling the weight of steel that shimmered faintly when he unwrapped it. His breath quickened, not from hesitation, but from a twisted anticipation. Meera stirred weakly, her hand twitching against the bedsheet. Her eyes fluttered open for seconds, glassy and unfocused. A faint sound escaped her throat, half plea, half gasp. Arjun froze, then leaned over her. "It's too late," he whispered, calm yet cold. "Sleep. The world was never meant for you beyond tonight." Her head turned slightly, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. The sight stirred something he mistook for power, feeding his resolve. With calculated precision, he pressed the cloth over her mouth, muffling what little resistance remained. Her arms flailed weakly, then fell limp. The room surrendered again to silence. Arjun moved methodically, dragging her body across the floor. The sound of her bangles clinking against the tiles echoed faintly, a fragile melody that mocked his control. He placed her near the trunk, his breathing steady, his mind replaying his plan step by step. The blade flashed under the lantern light. For a moment he paused, staring at his reflection in the steel, a groom dressed in splendor only hours ago, now transformed into something unrecognizable. Yet he smiled faintly, as if embracing the truth he had always hidden. The cut was swift, deliberate. The lantern flickered violently, throwing grotesque shapes across the walls. The silence that followed was heavier than before, an emptiness that swallowed even his own heartbeat. He wrapped the head carefully in cloth, placing it aside with reverence, as if keeping a secret too precious for the world. Sweat dripped down his temples, mixing with the smell of blood that now clung to the air. He doused the lantern briefly, letting darkness swallow the room. Only the faintest glow from the courtyard seeped under the door, painting a thin line of light that trembled with the weight of hidden horror. Outside, the first call of a rooster pierced the approaching dawn. In another room, relatives stirred in their sleep, unaware of the ritual completed only steps away. Arjun wiped his hands clean, his face calm, as though preparing to greet the morning like any other husband. But within those walls, the bride's absence had already begun to whisper toward discovery. The morning sun crept over the rooftops, spilling gold across the narrow alleys of the town. Roosters crowed, children stirred, and neighbors swept their courtyards, as if nothing had shifted in the night. Yet inside the grand house, silence lingered too thick, too strange, like smoke that refused to clear. Meera's parents arrived early, carrying sweets and silk shawls, ready to bless their daughter on her first morning as a wife. Her mother's face glowed with anticipation, though unease tugged faintly at her eyes. She had barely slept, haunted by the memory of Meera's hesitance during the wedding vows. Still, tradition demanded optimism. They knocked gently at the bridal chamber. No answer. Another knock, louder this time. Still nothing. Her father exchanged a glance with his wife, his brow furrowing. "Maybe she is resting," he murmured, though doubt crept into his tone. Arjun's voice broke the silence from behind the door, sharp and dismissive. "She's tired. Leave her." The parents hesitated. His words sounded rehearsed, stripped of warmth. "We'll just see her for a moment," her mother pleaded softly. No, the single word carried finality. Footsteps shifted inside, then retreated. The couple exchanged a troubled look, but withdrew, deciding not to force their way. Still, as the day unfolded, whispers spread. Guests from the wedding noticed Meera hadn't appeared for the morning rituals. Servants muttered that no light had emerged from the bridal chamber since last night. A sense of unease grew, a shadow stretching across the household. By afternoon, the whispers turned to suspicion. Children playing behind the house froze when they spotted something near the boundary wall, a bundle wrapped in blood-stained cloth, half hidden beneath firewood. One child, too curious to resist, tugged at the fabric. The sight that spilled out sent screams tearing into the air. Within minutes, the courtyard filled with neighbors. The bundle lay exposed, drenched fabric, the faint outline of what could not be mistaken. Mothers pulled their children away, men shouted in disbelief, and a tremor of fear shook the crowd. Someone shouted for the police. Meera's parents rushed to scene, their knees nearly giving way as they caught sight of the horror. Her mother collapsed, wailing, while her father stood paralyzed, eyes locked on the shape before him. The truth was undeniable. His daughter, stripped of dignity, violated beyond comprehension. Inside the house, Arjun sat still, staring at his hands as if waiting for this moment. His father demanded answers, his voice rising in panic, but Arjun remained calm, refusing to explain. When the police arrived, they found the door bolted from within. After forcing it open, the chamber revealed a scene that froze even seasoned officers. Blood smeared across the floor, faint streaks where a body had been dragged. The bedsheets crumpled, soaked, the air thick with the metallic stench of death. The trunk, pushed awkwardly into a corner, still carried stains despite hurried attempts to wipe them clean. And then, the headless body, hidden poorly, discovered within minutes. The officers recoiled, covering their noses against the smell. Neighbors outside gasped, as words spread faster than the wind. The schoolteacher, who once read poems to children, now reduced to a body without a face, her life stolen on the very night she should have been cherished. Arjun was nowhere to be found. The window at the back of the chamber stood open, curtains swaying with the breeze. He had vanished into the countryside before dawn, leaving behind only horror and silence. The crowd outside surged with anger, voices calling for justice, for answers. Some cursed his name, others whispered of curses upon the families. Meera's parents, broken and hollow, clung to each other as the police vowed to hunt him down. The town, once wrapped in celebration, now trembled under the weight of grief and shame. And as night fell again, posters with Arjun's face began to circulate, marking the beginning of a pursuit that would unearth secrets darker than anyone imagined. The posters went up before sunrise, Arjun's face staring from every corner of the town, his name inked in bold letters. Wanted for murder, the words declared, though the villagers didn't need the reminder. His betrayal had already seeped into every whispered conversation, every glance of fear and anger exchanged across the streets. Police officers questioned neighbors, each testimony adding fragments to the picture of a man they thought they knew. A shopkeeper recalled Arjun's temper, how he once smashed a bottle in his store when refused credit. A driver spoke of nights spent ferrying him to gambling dens, his pockets emptied by dawn. An old flame, coaxed into speaking, confessed he had threatened her once with words that still haunted her. "If you leave, you'll regret it." At the station, Inspector Melik spread the reports across his desk, piecing together the puzzle. "He planned this," he muttered. "The poison, the blade, it wasn't sudden rage. It was preparation." His junior officer hesitated before asking, "But why her? Why Meera?" Melik looked up, his voice hard. "Because she was pure. And men like him can't stand purity. They destroy what they can't control." Meanwhile, Arjun moved through the countryside like a shadow. He slept in abandoned farmhouses, stole food from markets under cover of night, and avoided the highways where checkpoints grew tighter each day. His once proud Shawani had been replaced with dust-stained clothes, scavenged from washing lines. Yet no disguise could hide the madness growing in his eyes. Alone, he argued with voices only he could hear. Sometimes Meera's eyes stared at him from the dark, wide and accusing. Sometimes he heard her whisper his name, soft and broken, sending him into rages that left him striking the walls until his hands bled. Still, he pressed on, convinced he could outwit the police. One evening, he entered a roadside tea stall, hood pulled low. The owner poured steaming chai into a cracked cup, his gaze lingering too long. Arjun snapped, "What are you looking at?" The stall fell silent. A boy cleaning tables darted out, running toward the police outpost a mile away. Arjun realized too late his face was no longer hidden, his infamy too widespread. By the time officers arrived, he had vanished into the fields, leaving only his cup of untouched tea behind. But each escape carved deeper into his mind, paranoia growing, sleep shrinking. The weight of Meera's silence followed him, pressing harder with every step. Back in town, Meera's parents clung to hope that justice would come, though grief hollowed their voices. Her mother wept at the temple steps, whispering prayers that trembled against the wind. Her father, eyes hardened, told Malik, "Find him. Do not let her death be forgotten." Malik nodded grimly. "We will find him. Men like Arjun can't run from their own shadows." And as days bled into weeks, the net tightened, pushing Arjun toward the breaking point, where fear, guilt and madness would collide in a reckoning no cage could silence. The farmhouse stood abandoned at the edge of a sugarcane field, its walls crumbling, its roof sagging under years of neglect. Villagers whispered that spirits lived there, but that was what made it perfect for Arjun. He had taken shelter for 3 nights, his body restless, his mind unraveling. The floor was littered with half-eaten food, empty bottles, and scraps of paper where he had scrawled her name again and again. Meera. On the 4th night, heavy boots crushed the silence outside. Flashlights cut through the fields, beams flickering between the stalks. Dogs barked in the distance, their growls drawing closer. Arjun jolted upright, sweat pouring down his face. He clutched the blade he had carried since that night, its steel now rusted and stained. The door burst open. "Drop it!" Inspector Malik's voice thundered. Officers stormed in, guns raised, chains ready. Arjun spun, his eyes wild, his voice breaking. "She's here. Don't you see her? She's watching." He pointed toward the corner, where only shadows clung to the wall. Two men lunged, tackling him to the ground. The blade clattered across the floor. His screams filled the room as the chains snapped shut around his wrists. "Don't touch me. She'll be angry. Meera will be angry." His words turned into sobs, his body convulsing against the cold iron. Dragged through the fields, he laughed suddenly, a sound so sharp it chilled the officers. "You fools," he shouted. "You think you caught me? No, she caught me first." At the station, under the harsh glare of a single bulb, Arjun sat shackled to a chair. Sweat slicked his face, his lips cracked from days without rest. Inspector Malik leaned forward, voice measured. "Tell us what happened that night." Arjun's eyes darted, unfocused. For a moment silence hung heavy, then his voice slipped out, low and broken. "She was perfect, too perfect. And I knew she would see through me. They all did." He lifted his hands, chains rattling. "But this time I wouldn't be the one left." Malik pressed. "You poisoned her. Why?" Arjun's gaze steadied, calm settling like a storm, finding its center. "Because purity is betrayal. Do you understand?" They smile. They promise, but inside they mock you. She mocked me with her silence, with her eyes. I couldn't allow it. His words twisted into confession and justification, every sentence more chilling than the last. "I gave her the drink. She hesitated, but she trusted me. They always trust on the first night." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "And when she fell, I felt whole. In that silence, I heard truth." Jean. The room tightened with unease. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, some averting their eyes. Malik kept his focus sharp. "And the blade? The beheading?" Arjun's breathing quickened. His eyes shone with a terrible light. "It wasn't rage. It was cleansing. I wanted her to never look at me again, never accuse me again. So I gave her peace. She belongs only to me now, and no one else will ever take her away." His voice broke into sobs, then laughter, swinging between agony and triumph. Malik slammed his palm against the table. "Peace? You call this peace? You butchered her." Arjun leaned forward, chains clinking. His whisper cut through the room. "She wasn't meant to live beyond that night. That was her destiny. That was mine." Silence followed, heavy as stone. For the first time, Malik saw not just a criminal, but a man hollowed out by obsession, consumed by demons that no sentence could truly cage. As dawn approached, the confession was written down, every word etched into record. Outside, villagers gathered at the gates demanding justice. Inside, Arjun sat slumped in his chains, muttering her name like a prayer that bound him tighter than iron ever could. The trial awaited, but the horror of his words had already delivered its own verdict. The courtroom swelled with whispers as Arjun was brought in, shackled but unshaken. Meera's parents sat rigid, her mother clutching a photograph, her father staring ahead, hollow-eyed. Witnesses spoke of poison purchased, screams silenced, and the bundle found near the wall. The prosecutor's voice was sharp, and when Arjun's recorded confession played, she wasn't meant to live beyond that night. The room froze in horror. The defense claimed madness, but the judge's verdict cut through, death by hanging. Cries of relief erupted, yet grief pressed heavier on Meera's family. Her mother wept into her hands, whispering, "Justice, my child," though the words rang hollow. Arjun smiled faintly as he was led away, muttering, "She is still with me." At home, her portrait remained on the wall, eyes unblinking, a reminder that punishment had come, but closure never would.